Hi, this is Sarah from Little Stab Studios. Today I'm going to be going over how to make a UV resin cast embroidery or cross stitch in particular piece. I'm going to be going from the beginning where I use decoupage glue, also known as Mod Podge, and I'm going to be coating the piece in this so that it is not going to be porous, there's not going to be water or anything able to get into it. This is going to help the stitching stay a little bit stronger, and it's not going to be getting super dark like it can if you don't coat the piece first. I only used one coat here, but I would highly recommend doing 2, perhaps even 3 coats until you get your piece nice and stiff. I'd also recommend making sure that you get the back really well in addition to the front. So the items that we're going to be needing to complete this project are a cross-stitch piece, Mod Podge or decoupage as I just used previously, a mold or bezel for the piece to go in, X-Acto knife or scissors for cutting, and a mat if you're using a knife, UV resin, alcohol wipes for cleaning, a mask to be using around the resin, a light so that we can cure it, either a UV light or sunlight, and also recommended would be a lighter, a file to sand your finished piece, glitter, pigment, or colored resin if you want to mess around with the look, magnets if you want to make a needle minder, and some strong glue to attach those magnets. After you've applied your decoupage and allowed it to dry, you're going to want to cut around your piece so that it fits the mold or bezel. What I should have done is make a template or a stencil and traced over my piece, but I didn't think ahead well, so I just slowly cut around it with an X-Acto knife instead, as you can see I'm doing here. I went slow and steady so that I didn't make any mistakes. After you've completed cutting around your piece, now it's time to begin using the resin. Now get your mold ready and apply a thin base coat of resin to the bottom of it. You'll want to spread the resin around the entire surface. You can use a nail brush, a toothpick, or a small plastic stick to do this. If you see a lot of air bubbles, you can use a lighter to help get rid of them. Allowing the resin to rest a bit will also help, but a lighter is pretty useful for speeding things up. Next, you can place your cross-stitch piece into the resin. In the video, I placed the piece face up, but after seeing the results, I would actually recommend placing it face down. You'll want to press it firmly all over the piece so it gets fully submerged into the resin. Once your piece is firmly in the resin, you'll want to fill the mold the rest of the way. The resin will move slowly from the middle to the sides, so when you're almost done, go slowly so you don't accidentally overfill your piece. You can use a brush again to help move the resin around, but be careful about moving the cross-stitch piece. Don't forget to use the lighter again once you've filled up your mold so that you can make sure to get out any extra air bubbles that might have formed. Next, you'll place your piece either in the sun or, to save some time, under a UV lamp. The one I'm using here is an old-fashioned fluorescent one. There's a lot of newer ones on the market that use LED lights instead and take up a lot less space. I put a link in the description to one that I found on Amazon. I haven't used it, but it looks good. I'm using a bit of aluminum foil just to keep the light in and to help reflect even more of the UV light back in. Just, a little trick that I learned watching some other resin artists on YouTube. I left it to cure on the top for about 2.5 minutes. Then I flipped it over and let the bottom get a bit more exposure to the UV light. You don't want to take it out of the mold until you've cured every side of the piece. If it feels a little bit sticky, you can just let it sit under the light for a little extra time. Finally, it's time to remove the piece from the mold. Slowly pull the silicone away from the resin, making sure that the piece is cured all over. While this piece did cure really well and has a nice smooth finish, it did end up getting some large air bubbles over the stitching as well. The back turned out really good, however. I think part of this is due to using only one not super thick coat of decoupage, and it also could be that my resin was a little bit old. I couldn't see any visible bubbles when I put the piece into cure, so I was a little bit bummed out, but for personal use, I still think it's okay. Aside from the bubbles, it did cure well, and the edges are all very smooth. It's shiny without being sticky anywhere, so I didn't need to file it down at all. Now it's time to attach the magnet. I'm going to be using a 1 centimeter diameter magnet that I bought from my Daiso, and it's pretty strong. I'm also going to be using a quick drying glue that is recommended for working with both metals and plastics. After applying a thin but even coat all over the magnet, I'm going to place it onto the resin back and make sure to center it as best as I can. Then you want to let it dry on a flat surface. Wait a few minutes and then test it out to make sure that the glue has dried completely. If you're using a different glue, make sure that you wait the recommended amount of time. Test it out by placing a needle onto the resin front and make sure that the needle will stick. Once it is, you're ready to use this as a needle minder. After completing this project, my final thoughts are this. I would not start out with a sentimental piece. I wouldn't use this on any cross-stitch piece that was really important to me at all. I would also test out all of the materials first. I worked with UV resin quite a bit, and I still made a few mistakes here. Start with a smaller piece, like a needle minder like I did, and then you won't be using as many materials in this. Consider using 2 to 3 coats of decoupage. Work upside down so the finished side is closer to the surface. Also, make sure to use a lighter to get rid of all your air bubbles. Good luck!